Yo, what's going on? It's your main man, Rick the Dawn. Hey, what's going on, y'all? So I finally was able to catch up with the latest episode of Survivor, and it was a doozy. A lot going on in that episode, and I wanted to, talk with you all and see what you thought. The very first question that I have to ask: who is currently the biggest threat in the game after episode 3? I believe that we're now starting to be able to find the emerging players or players who are standing out amongst the bunch. And I am very curious what you think. There's a reason why I do these episodes live, because the hope is that people will join in and kind of push back against what I'm saying, rather than this being somewhat of a dictatorship where I just say what I want to say, and that's the only narrative. But ideally, we would have people kind of pushing back and joining in with the conversation. And definitely, this episode would have been a great time for you to be here. Before we jump into it, this episode is brought to you by wordy.com. That is my social media site. It's also brought to you by reallyhood.com, where you can find the Really Hood podcast, my podcast. And lastly, it is brought to you by brokenheartshirts.com. We can get custom clothing. Now, I want to go ahead and put out the people who I believe are the strongest threats as of this moment. Number one, I have to start with Carson. Carson is certainly a force to be reckoned with. We know that he is very charming. He's playing the nerd role, and I'm not sure if I'm buying it. Carson is not that naive. He's a player that can easily go undetected, if not spotted early. And it's my opinion that Carson, or a player like Carson, should have already been voted out. I think every week that Carson stays in the game, he becomes more and more of a threat. The next player I want to talk about, and this might be a surprise to a lot of people, and it is Kane. Kane is a player who is, in my opinion, just not being looked at. He's someone who is under the radar. Anytime I see a player who was able to get other players on the game of Survivor to smile and laugh, I know that they're dangerous. I've seen, if not every season, just about every season of Survivor. So I know what I'm looking for when it comes to a winner or a legacy player. And Kane has all of the attachments to be that. There's a point in this episode where he's kind of doing the Canadian national anthem, and everyone's just bawling out laughing. And I knew at that moment he was a special player. Another player that I think is worth talking about is Matt G. This guy is a Swiss Army knife. He can do just about everything, and everything that he does do, he does it well. And I believe if they don't get him out soon, he's going to be the second coming of Richard Hatch. You can tell that that is the game that he's channeling. He already has an idol. He put out a fake idol, and episode 3 showed me that this guy's for real. Okay, I believe he's the one who led his team to the victory in the award challenge. So certainly a force to be reckoned with. Another player that I think needs to get a little attention, at least from my perspective, is Danny. Danny is a very strong player. He has the immunity idol. He plays a good game in terms of being able to misdirect. He's strategic. You saw what he did this episode by putting in the fake idol. He's obviously very sneaky because he was able to get to the cage multiple times, remove the lock, put the lock back on, and not even a whiff of detection from the other tribe mates. You saw he was able to plant the fake idol and have Matt B find the fake idol and even come up to him and say, "Hey, so I saw what you put in your pocket." Like, he's playing a meta game, a game that is about the game. And I just have to respect that. Now, this might be a little surprise for everyone, but I think Heidi is in a very, very good spot. The fact that she just seems to be making the decisions without other people being able to recognize that she's doing so. It is my opinion that that's the kind of player you want to be in this game. You don't want to be at the very top like a Matt G. This is my personal opinion, because at some point you're going to have a lot of mid-tier players say, "Hey, we got to get him out or we have no chance." And Matt G is going to be the perfect person to take a shot at, whereas Heidi can camouflage herself as one of those mid-tier players and possibly go further in the game. Now, there's other players that you can probably throw in the conversation. I won't, but I think Brandon is a good person to throw in the conversation. I think Franny is a good person. I think Matt B is a good person to throw in the conversation. I even like Lauren to some extent. But I think the last player that I'll consider to be somewhat of a threat will be Yam Yam. He has a lot of the same qualities that I pointed out in Kane in terms of being able to make people laugh, and that kind of personality can take you really far. Can you imagine trying to battle against Yam Yam in the final 3? When they're trying to decide who to pick for the win. Can you imagine having to sit next to Yam Yam? The guy is incredibly charismatic. And I think he has all the makings of a player who can run away with this game. So the question becomes, who do you see as the biggest threat as of this moment? Those are the players who I think will be a force to be reckoned with. Now, I do want to just talk about some things real quick. First off, Carson. Carson showed a lot of overconfidence this episode. Some people might not agree with that point, but it's my opinion that Carson is showing a little bit of that naivety or that young, we've all seen this player in Survivor. They're so young, they're so fresh, they're so new, they're excited, they always smile in their diary confessions, and Carson is starting to look like that type of player. He fashions himself as a super player, and I think that tag is legitimate, but will overconfidence at some point reach up and snag Carson's game? I believe so. I think the fact that, and I don't know her name. I want to say it's the young lady here. Yeah, it was Sarah. Once Sarah was voted out, I'm sorry. Once Sarah's main what was it, Helen? Yeah, once Helen was voted out, which was Sarah's main player, ride or die in the game. Once Helen was voted out, you heard what Sarah said. Sarah said that Carson was the biggest threat in the game, and she even pointed out, hey, even though he's the biggest threat in the game, I still trust him. And she noted that that's why I think Carson is such a big threat, because I know he's a snake, but at the same time, I'm still charmed. And I thought that was a really, really interesting quote, because it just shows how dangerous Carson is. But at the same time, I think it alludes to the fact that other players recognize that. Now, next, I want to talk about Maddy and Franny. You saw a lot of talk in the tribe where there was a lot of conversation about them being two votes and the power of two. We know that Matt B doesn't have his vote this season, or I'm sorry, this week or this episode. And Franny was obviously very important or pivotal to, Matt B's, voice this week. Obviously, Matt B in a lot of ways is speaking through Franny. But do you think it's fair that they're targeted as this major threat when, it just comes across to me as if these are two people who are not thinking about the game? And I think I want to pose that question to you. Is Matt B and Franny's relationship legitimate? Is it honest? Is it gameplay? That's the question I want to ask, because we saw their tribe mates have that same discussion. Like, hey, it's very cute to see them talk about Star Wars. They're geeking out, but are they doing so strategically? And I'll be the first one to throw it out there. I'm not sure that what I'm seeing is strategic. I think I see two like souls or like-minded individuals who are genuinely enjoying each other's company. Now, does that still factor into the game? Yeah, I do believe that, but I'm not sure that their primary concern is the game. That's just my personal opinion. All right, but I want to just talk just a moment about how impressive Danny was. Come on now, can we just give Danny a slow clap? Danny did such an amazing job this episode. He basically did exactly what I was talking about in the last episode, my last episode reaction. Go check it out, episode 2 reaction. I talked about what I would do if I were the one to find the hidden immunity idol for this season. We know that this season's hidden immunity idol just comes with different rules. It's in a cage, it's out in the open. And I did talk about what I would do if I found it. And just to watch Danny just go out and do what he did was very impressive. He obviously took both idols. He actually put the what was it, the instructions for the fake idol in his mouth. I'm not sure if he actually swallowed that like seriously, but if he did, that's a major commitment. But he balled up the fake immunity idol instructions. He put the fake immunity idol back in the bag with the immunity idol instructions, and he hit the key again. And he wrapped it so neat and nicely. And I just said, this guy is on another level. And he did an amazing job with steering Matt B to the idol, because apparently they didn't do a good job with looking and finding the idol on their own. So Danny had to intervene and kind of point Matt to it. And Matt finds it. And here's a big question I have for you. Once Matt B finds the hidden immunity idol, he stuffs the key in his pocket, and he's going to pretty much go off and kind of do his own thing and try to keep it low profile. But Danny makes the decision to confront Matt B and say, hey, I know you put something in your pocket. Do you want to come clean? The big question that myself and other players, I'm sure, are asking themselves, and it'd be nice to have a conversation about this. Did Danny make a mistake by confronting Matt B about what he had found under the tree? Would it have been smarter for Danny to completely ignore the fact that he saw Matt B find that key, and just watch as Matt B tried to keep it under wraps with the sole knowledge that he knows exactly what Matt B found. And maybe he can try to set Matt B up as he tries to unlock the cage. I thought that Danny's decision to confront Matt B right away was a bad move, because Danny could have been the only one with that knowledge. And we know that knowledge is currency in the game of Survivor. And what I think Danny did was he took that currency and just gave it away. And Matt B obviously denied it. And then after a while, he thought about it. He went to talk to both Josh and Danny separately, letting them know, like, hey, I did find it. But I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I thought Danny should have obviously kept that to himself. All right, Matt B finds the key to the fake immunity idol. So I do want to talk about the other immunity idol, the one that was found on the other tribe. First off, shout out to another player that's playing amazing, Matt G. Matt G did an amazing job with finding the idol. And let me see, what was it? It was the it was Jamie. That's who it was. Jamie is out, and I really enjoyed this segment. We know that Survivor sometimes gives you these segments where they really take a deep dive into the player's life and just give us some background context. I enjoyed what I saw about Brandon. I want to say that was what, last week, possibly, I forget. But this episode, they certainly focused on a few individuals, and Jamie was one of those players. And we find out that she has this this love for plants. And it's very adorable. I have to say that Jamie's personality this episode really did intrigue me. I enjoyed to see, I enjoyed seeing some things that she's passionate about. But she's going around and she's eating worms of all things. She's finding plants, and you see your main man Matt G kind of tailing behind, and Matt G says, "Hey, what's that?" And then Jamie goes down near I want to say what was the water well, perhaps. She digs down and she's looking for worms, but in looking for worms, she finds the hidden immunity idol that was planted by Matt G. Can we get Matt G a slow clap? Like, that was really, really well done. And I love the editing of this particular spot, because when Jamie finds the hidden immunity idol or the clue or what have you, the key, whatever, the viewer or the average viewer is thinking that Jamie has the original. All right, she has the one that Brandon played, but they do a little rewind showing us that Matt G was the one who found the original and planted the fake one that Jamie found. Wow, it was really well edited, really well timed. I loved it. And again, how impressive is Matt G? I think he is certainly someone who will be a force to be reckoned with, because he's smart and he's sneaky. He's two things that will get you far in the game of Survivor. He's smart and he's sneaky. So he basically mirrored what Danny did. He planted the hidden immunity idol. But the biggest difference between what Danny and Matt G did is Matt G didn't put the fear of God into the person who found it, whereas Danny made Matt B feel uncomfortable. I feel like Matt G made Jamie feel absolutely comfortable. And I'm not even sure that anyone knows about what Jamie found outside of Matt G. So I think there is a little space in which Matt G is playing a smarter game than a player like Danny. Okay. All right. But anyway, we go to the challenge, and I really love the structure of this year's, or rather this season's, challenges. I know this is not the first time they've done this, where they kind of they fuse the award challenge with the tribal council challenge or what have you. Or no, it's the immunity challenge and award challenge. This is not the first time they fused them, but this season just feels a little more right when it comes to that particular concept. Okay, you get first place, you get the biggest reward. You get second place, you get the second biggest or the second reward. And if you get third place, you go to tribal council. I mean, you can't really argue with that setup. This game was interesting. Okay, it's a lot to talk about here. I'll keep it short. Obviously, Claire sitting out for the third time was something that definitely didn't look good optically. You even heard Jeff, once Claire decided to sit out once again, Jeff kind of looks at her and say, "Hey, so is this strategy?" And I know Jeff. Like, I have never met Jeff in my life, but I know Jeff's personality from watching so many seasons of Survivor. And Jeff absolutely hates a couple things. Okay, Jeff hates quitters. If you are so like back like in the earlier seasons of Survivor, there were a lot of players who quit the game. Like, a lot of people might not realize this, and it's just my personal opinion. The game of Survivor has gotten a lot easier. I know that Jeff takes your flint if you lose and all that kind of stuff, but the reason I know that the game has become easier, or rather smarter, because you can make that argument as well, It's because in the earlier seasons of Survivor, there were actual quits. Like people would quit. Like they would play the game. They say, "Oh wow, this is real," and they would quit the game. You don't see that at the same clip. I mean, now, even if a person cracks their head, i.e., Bruce, they still don't want to leave the game. All right. Because somewhere they've tweaked a couple things to make the game fun and survivable. But there was a point in this franchise that this game was so realistic that there were players who just quit right in the middle. And we don't have that as much now, but I'll say there are a few things that I've noticed over the years that Jeff hates. Number one, he hates people who quit the game. And I believe that stems from the fact that he realizes there are thousands of applications of people who want to be on this game, and they only pick about what is it, 16 people, give or take a few. And if someone quits, it's like robbing someone of an experience. So he hates those, and he hates people who sit out in challenges. Okay, so when Claire sits out for a third time, you hear Jeff's disdain, and he says, this is a first. And it's not a first time that someone set out multiple challenges. It's not the first time, but I guess you can make the argument that maybe it's the first time that someone set out the first three. So Jeff is absolutely fuming. He doesn't let it show like he let it show in the past. There's some seasons where Jeff let people have it. Like, so you're going to just sit out or you're going to quit? Or he'll say, okay, everybody that's not playing, sit on a sit out bench, right? He would actually call, like, sit on the quitters bench or something. He would say little nuggets that would let you know that he was very, very unhappy about people who set out. Anyway, Claire sits out a third time, and yeah, Jeff is not happy. And for me, the big question is, was it the right move? Would Claire have made anything better? I'm going to go on record as saying no. And I do like I won't say like, I do understand why she sits out. I think she's lazy. I'm sorry. I think she's a little on the lazy side. I think she's a little fearful of her talents and her abilities to thrive in a challenge. She's seeing all these players, they're swimming, they're jumping, they're showing all this, I don't know, this providing. I think that some people look at that and say, if you look at Claire's body size, she's small, she's skinny, she's kind of dainty. Maybe she's looking at that like, I can't do that. And she just doesn't have that instinct to say, well, I'll try anyway, right? If you look at Noelle from Survivor 43, the lady was out there with one leg, right? And she wouldn't even sit out. Like, if you ask Noelle to sit out in a challenge, if you know who Noelle is from season 43, if you asked Noelle to sit out, like, she would fight you, right? So, that may be where some of Jeff's disdain comes from. It's like, hey, I just saw Noelle, a lady with one leg, come out here and compete. And she would almost die if she had to sit out. And I'm watching an able-bodied individual sit out 3 times in a row. But you can't argue with success, because here's the counter to that. Claire set out 2 weeks in a row, and her team did very well. So it's like, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So from that standpoint, I understood where Claire was coming from. All right, but anyway, Rat 2 ends up winning first place, and Matt G kills it. Okay, Matt G does an amazing job for Rat 2. He solves that particular puzzle very quickly, so quickly that you see the other players say, hey, he how did he do? So they start cheating. All right, I saw this a lot in like the challenge. If you ever watched the challenge from MTV's The Challenge, when somebody finishes a puzzle, a lot of times they'll mess the puzzle up just so no one can copy. So I was very surprised to see that Rat 2 did not go back and break down their completed puzzle to keep the other players from not looking. But Jeff did say, hey, this is a first. And I'm like, wait, I've seen someone use another group's puzzle. I'm not sure this is the first time. And if it is, perhaps I'm mixing Survivor and a challenge. And maybe that also explains why Matt G and his team, or Rat 2, did not tear down their completed puzzle. I don't know. But I think I've seen that before. Anyway, Tika wins second place, and Yam Yam, he just balls out. Yam Yam is a strong player. He is showing to be a very strong leader, very charismatic. And as such, we know that Soka loses and goes to Tribal Council for the very first time. It was good to see this team at Tribal Council because it let them know that the game is real. I think up until this point, they were like very kumbaya. Everybody was happy, but we saw what happened. And there was a lot of drama that took place at camp. Claire's name was thrown out. Josh's name was thrown out. We know how this game works, okay? And I hate to say this, but a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times when it comes to tribal councils and, it's a tribe's turn to start voting people out, a lot of times the Black Americans go first. It just is what it is. And this was no different. Oh, you saw Claire and Josh even attack each other. They were so nervous and afraid and wanted to preserve their own survival life that hey, they even aimed at each other at one point. Now, I want to ask this question: who was actually the weaker player on that tribe? If you look at Soka, who was the actual weak player? I think Claire was the weakest. Okay. Sitting out 3 challenges in a row, not good. And then we heard a lot of players, including Clear, say, hey, what about Josh? And I'm thinking to myself, how bad would that decision have been? And as a counter to that decision, see, we're just going layer by layer. As a counter to that decision, does that mean that the game of Survivor could be a little biased, could be a little chauvinistic? Can it be? Because even I, as a viewer and someone who values female rights and female opportunity. You can almost call me a feminist, right? You can almost. But even still, if I'm in the game of Survivor, I'm looking at Josh and I'm looking at Claire, and I'm asking myself, which of these 2 players can help us get further? And Claire's fine, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I would have voted her out as well because I'm looking at Josh, and this guy is literally chiseled from top to bottom, just all muscle. I don't even think he has any body fat, even before he got to the show. And I'm like, Claire is already sitting out. She seems to be very gossipy, talking in cracks and corners. So, for me, Claire would have been gone regardless. There is also a case to make about Matt B and Franny. And I was very surprised that once they were put in the hot seat and having to vote someone out, they didn't stick to some of those things they were saying in the beginning because initially Matt B and Franny were the biggest people on the chopping block because of that relationship. But that tore down and broke down very fast. Anyway, we get to tribal council. A lot of things come out, and you probably wouldn't believe this, but you should. Jeff does a little bit of steering. Now, Jeff, from time to time during tribal councils, he'll ask questions that I know that are pointed. Okay. And I'm not sure if the people at tribal council understand this, but as the viewer at home, because you're able to see all the background conversations and you're able to see everyone's conversations, you know when Jeff is asking a pointed question. Now, if you're in the game, you're not able to see this person talking to that person or that person talking to that person. So when Jeff asks a question, it comes across as very pure. But as a viewer, you've seen all the conversations. And I'm going to assume that the people who are doing the recording are bringing that footage to Jeff and saying, hey, Jeff, here's something you might want to talk about during tribal council. So call me crazy on this, but I believe I saw Jeff do a little steering as it relates to Claire because Jeff asks Claire directly. And this was very surprising to me, by the way. He asks Claire, so Claire, you set out 3 challenges in a row. Is that a problem? Like he just kind of just puts her on Front Street. And I'm like, hey, that's not, hey, hold on, wait a minute. I feel like Jeff's role should be to prompt people to talk themselves. I felt like Jeff almost interjected himself in the game when he asked Claire that question. Hey, Claire, you set out 3 times in a row. And immediately after saying that, you saw her teammates react. And I'm like, okay, fine. The argument against that point is they all wanted to say that anyway. And Jeff just kind of broke the ice. But I would have been more comfortable if Jeff would have asked somebody on her team, say, hey, what do you feel about, people sitting out, and let them throw Claire under the bus. I feel like Jeff almost single-handedly got rid of Claire because we know that Claire goes home and you can make whatever arguments you want. But I think her departure was solely based on the fact that she set out 3 times in a row. In this game, it's always about like, let's find a reason. Can we find a reason, right? And I gotta call a spade a spade. If you know about me or anything about me, I'm not afraid to say what I want to say. I was very upset. Okay, and I'm gonna use the word upset. It's a strong word. I was very upset about Franny and Claire's gestures towards Josh. I believe Franny was the biggest perpetrator. Franny kept saying Josh is very, I forget the word she used, but I want to say she used the word sneaky. I could be wrong, but I feel like I'm right. She's like, Josh is very sneaky. And I just thought to myself, Franny, what has Josh done that is sneaky? In fact, it's funny because what you're doing right now is sneakier than anything I've seen Josh do. Because up until this point, Josh has been a very decent individual, especially on the game of Survivor. I've seen the worst of the worst. Okay, I've seen the worst of the worst. And Josh is a pretty pleasant guy in the game. He's very helpful. I'm not sure what he is outside of the camera. I mean, she probably has insider information, but I just found it a little interesting that Franny instantly started to use words like sneaky as it relates to Josh, and I have no reason, I have no understanding of the basis behind those comments. When you got a whole player like Danny, who's actually sneaky, doing what do you call them? Soldier roles in the forest, trying to get a key or a fake idol back in the cage. But you missed that though, Franny. So I did not like those comments. I thought that they were a little unfounded and a little unfair. And you saw Claire double down on some of those comments. And I just thought to myself, like, hey, Claire, you haven't played in the challenge. You haven't did anything at all. What? And I understand it's a game. I know someone may be watching this saying, hey, Rick, it's a game. Of course, those type of things will be said. And you know what? To that, I say, touche. I understand it's a game. I just hate that the game tends to kind of rear up some of those old things I've been seeing season after season, where players are targeted for their age, their race, their gender. And that's the only reason, right? I've seen it over and over again. You know, if the person's really old, they'll say something else where they'll here's the problem I have. Let me just take a few seconds to get this off my heart. That way I can move on. Like a lot of times, players in Survivor are targeted for the following: age, race, gender, romance. Those are about the four that I see a lot. And what upsets me is when I see players not just own it and say, hey, I don't like this person because of this. I don't like this person because of that. Let's get them out because of this or that. And they make up this arbitrary reason to target them. Like, I'm just like, what did Josh do besides, like, what did he do? Help me out. Help me understand this. So I've seen this so many times, so many times. Like, yeah, this person, he eats a lot. You're just saying he's old and he's slow in the challenges. And maybe you don't want to just say that. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. Or she's very like, no, you're just saying she's a woman. You don't think she can compete at the same level as a male in this game. And at this point in the game, strength is important. Just say that, right? And so I thought that the comments about Josh was a little over the top. Just my personal opinion, of course. Now we see Claire go home. She makes a decision to play the shot in the dark, and I am very curious to see what you think about that move. I thought it was the right move. Apparently she did not trust her tribe and she knew she would go home. And the question becomes, well, ain't no question. It didn't work. That's pretty much it. It didn't work at all. And I guess my final question, if there is one at all, is how do you feel about Claire leaving? I am very curious to know if there's anybody who like Claire's game, like Claire's individual. I'll be honest with you. I did not. I didn't care for it too much. She didn't give me much to chew on. Most of the time, and you can blame this on editing, most of the time that I saw Claire, she was, talking about somebody, sitting down. She even coined a phrase like, hey, let's be more lazy. I think she said that last episode. But, Claire, oh man, she just didn't do it for me. And then when she made the comments about Josh, I was pretty much done. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a big Josh fan. Let's just get that out the way. I'm not a fan of Josh. But at the same time, I just hate when people pick on other people for any reason, right? And that's why I have strong feelings about both Claire and Franny. But nevertheless, that is my opinions and my reaction to episode 3. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe. I'll be doing this every week. And yeah, if you have anything you want to push back on, do so in the comments and be safe out there.